Throughout U.S. military history, there have only been 2 Marines who have earned 2 Medals of Honor in separate acts of valor. One was Major General Smedley Butler. By the end of his military career, he was the most decorated Marine in U.S. history. The only other U.S. Marine to earn 2 Medals of Honor was Devil Dog Sergeant Major Dan Dailey, America's fightingest Marine. His heroic actions in the Boxer Rebellion, the Banana Wars, and World War I exemplified the courage and commitment of a man who lived by the Marine Corps motto, Semper Fidelis. This is the unbelievable story of Marine Corps legend Dan Dailey, next on Mark in History. This is the historical marker for Marine Sergeant Major Daniel J. Dailey. His marker is located here in Glen Cove, New York, where he grew up. He was a Marine private when he earned his first Medal of Honor during the Boxer Rebellion and the Peking Siege in China in 1900. 15 years later, he earned his second Medal of Honor while serving bravely during the Haitian Rebellion as Gunnery Sergeant with the 2nd Marine Regiment. And he would have earned a third Medal of Honor in World War I's Battle of Belleau Wood if not for politics back home. Now, let's learn more about the incredible story behind this marker. Dan Dailey was born to Irish immigrant parents John and Ellen Dailey. Now, there are questions about Dan Dailey's actual birthday and country of origin. Certain census records show Dailey born in County Cork, Ireland, on November 11, 1870. However, most historians use the date and birthplace that Dan Dailey put on his Marine Corps enlistment papers, November 11, 1873, Glen Cove, New York, which made Dailey a younger American-born recruit when he enlisted as a Marine at age 26. Young Dan Dailey grew up in a real tough neighborhood during a real tough time. The fall of 1873 was the beginning of one of the bleakest economic periods in U.S. history. The collapse of a Wall Street investment house triggered the panic. The New York Stock Exchange closed for 10 days in an unsuccessful attempt to stop the bleeding of red ink. Dan Dailey grew up and worked in the area of dirty factories and shabby tenements. At age 12, Dan Dailey worked as a New York City newspaper boy in Manhattan. It was an everyday struggle for survival. Newspaper boys literally fought for the best locations so they could sell more papers faster and earn more money. Dailey was a natural fighter from an early age. It could have something to do with him being bullied because he was a small-built boy. On the streets of New York City is where he would have acquired some of his early combat training. As he grew up, young Dailey gained a reputation as a boxer and fought in local sports clubs for money. At 5 feet 6 inches tall and 132 pounds, what Dailey lacked in size, he made up for in grit. By his mid-20s, Dailey decided he wanted to leave the tenements in New York and pursue a life of adventure. Dailey enlisted in the Marines on January 10, 1899, hoping to see action in Cuba against the Spanish. Although the Spanish-American War had effectively ended before Dailey enlisted, the period of American expansionism had just begun. By late 1899, insurgents in China, who called themselves the Fist of Righteous Harmony, rebelled against Western influence in the country and were openly attacking Chinese Christians and Western missionaries. To Westerners, these Chinese nationalists were known as boxers because their martial art moves looked like shadowboxing. By May 1900, the boxers were roaming the countryside near Peking, killing foreign nationals at will. To protect Christian diplomats and American missionaries, U.S. Marines were sent in as part of an international response in 1900. After boot camp and graduation, Private Dan Dailey became a shipboard Marine assigned to the Asian Fleet on the USS Newark. On May 20, 1900, he and a detachment of Marines sailed out of Manila Bay bound for China in the defense of American residents under siege by the Boxers in Peking. June 20th, 1900, marked the beginning of a 55-day siege of the international legations, which were walled compounds where foreign families resided. The legation's roughly 400 military defenders now faced a combined force of about 50,000 Boxers and Chinese imperial troops. The defenders in Peking knew that the relief force was on its way, but could they hold on? Marine Captain Newt Hall and Private Dan Daly mounted one part of the wall that had a long field of fire. The killing began almost immediately. Daly, an excellent Marine marksman, had selected his killing ground. On July 14, 1900, Captain Hall left Private Daly alone to protect his section of the wall, while Hall left to bring up reinforcements. Despite Chinese snipers firing at him and attacking the wall with ladders, Daly fought them off all night long, shooting dozens until his ammunition ran out. He then resorted to using his bayonet and rifle butt to knock the Boxers off the top of the wall as they climbed up. When reinforcements finally arrived the next day, they found a single, exhausted Marine greeting them, surrounded by piles of enemy dead. To their disbelief, Private Daly had inflicted a heavy toll on the attacking forces. Reports put the number of those killed or wounded at 200 insurgents. After surveying the terrain and the massive numbers of casualties caused by Daly that night, he was recommended for his first Medal of Honor. General Chesty Puller was famous for saying, "Take me to the brig, I want to see the real Marines." Well, Dan Daly was one of those real Marines. According to his military service records, some of Dan Daly's military infractions included being 10 hours late over leave, under the influence of alcohol while on post, guilty of drunkenness in barracks, using obscene, threatening, and abusive language to the sergeant of the guard, returning late from liberty, leaving camp without permission, drunk and AWOL, and being drunk on guard, plus smuggling in liquor. So, what were his punishments? Reverted from corporal to private, solitary confinement in the brig for 30 days twice, forfeited 3 months' salary, restriction for 6 days, assigned extra duty, and assigned to kitchen duty as a cook. Eventually, Dan Daly got the hang of being a proper U.S. Marine, and it only took 10 years. On January 31, 1908, Daly began his third 4-year enlistment and was reinstated to the rank of corporal. Over the years, Daly was offered a direct commission many times, but he declined on the grounds that he would rather be an outstanding sergeant than just another officer. On March 14, 1911, Sergeant Daly and his Marine attachment were serving as guards aboard the USS Springfield, which was stationed at San Juan Naval Station. Suddenly, a gasoline fire broke out on this wooden cargo schooner. Daly and 6 Marine privates had to extinguish the flames before its cargo of gasoline and powder magazines could blow up the ship. The 2 sailors on board who discovered the fire tried in vain to extinguish the flames with water. Daly, who had served on board ships since 1899, knew that water was the most ineffective element to use on a gasoline fire. He ordered 3 of his Marines to form a sand bucket brigade. Daly also ordered some of the men to smother the fire with tarps in their jackets. After a tense 20 minutes, the fire was out. Every man involved in the event was injured, but there were no fatalities. Daly was one of the most burned members of the group, with severe damage to parts of his face and arms. The action earned all 7 Marines letters of commendation from Marine Commandant William Biddle and Secretary of Navy George Meyer. A dangerous revolt was brewing in Haiti. Between 1911 and 1915, 7 Haitian presidents were assassinated or overthrown. In the summer of 1915, President Woodrow Wilson sent the U.S. Marines into Haiti to restore order and maintain political stability to the island. On October 22, 1915, 42-year-old Gunnery Sergeant Dan Daly led a reconnaissance patrol of 38 mounted Marines into the interior of the island to locate the strongholds of the Haitian rebels called Cacos. At dusk 2 days later, some 400 Caco rebels ambushed the small Marine force as it was crossing a river in a deep jungle ravine. The Marines managed to get ashore without losing a man, but they lost 12 horses and the mule carrying their only machine gun. Once a defensive perimeter was established, Daly covertly made his way back to the river that night. Reaching the riverbank, Daly slipped into the water and repeatedly dove to find the patrol's machine gun. Daly finally located the dead mule, detached the machine gun and the ammunition, and brought the load ashore in several trips. He then strapped the machine gun to his back and returned through the jungle past the Cacos to the Marine position. When morning broke, the Marines were able to form a better defense and began pouring machine gun fire into the rebels. When the dust settled and the brass stopped flying, the insurgents were thoroughly crushed. Major Smedley Butler, commander of that Marine detachment, commended Gunnery Sergeant Dan Daly for his second Medal of Honor. With the award of these medals, Daly and Butler became the first and only Marines to ever receive 2 Medals of Honor for separate actions. Daly received his second medal on September 29, 1917, shortly before embarking for service in France and heading straight into the Great War. As we will soon see, world events would present Daly with the biggest fight of his life. Daly had arrived in France in November 1917 as First Sergeant of the 73rd Machine Gun Company, 6th Marine Regiment. After 7 months of fighting, a major 27-day offensive began by the German army as they pushed towards Paris. It became known as the Battle of Belleau Wood. 5 days into it, with Marine positions under heavy German bombardment, 44-year-old First Sergeant Daly visited all his machine gun positions, rallying his men. The battle was terrible as Marines had to advance through a waist-high wheat field into German machine gun fire. At one point, while leading a local counterattack, Daly urged his men forward, shouting the now famous line, "Come on, you sons of bitches, do you want to live forever?" Daly pushed his surviving men through the enemy fire and located the source of the machine gun. He single-handedly attacked the enemy position, capturing the German machine gun and killing the 3-man crew. Several days later, a machine gun section advanced close to Daly's company and pinned it down. Daly, armed only with a .45 caliber automatic pistol and hand grenades, single-handedly charged and eliminated the Germans. Later that day, he brought in, under heavy fire, several wounded Marines during a German attack near a French village. Daly was wounded at least 3 times during his battles in France. Daly's tenacity helped lead the Marines to clear the woods and win the battle for Allied forces. For his actions at the Battle of Belleau Wood, Dan Daly was recommended for his 3rd Medal of Honor through Army channels because the commander of the American Expeditionary Force was Army General John Pershing. Someone in the Army chain of command, however, just could not accept the idea of a Marine having 3 Medals of Honor. So Daly was instead awarded the Distinguished Service Cross and later the Navy Cross and France's Médaille Militaire. The reputation of the Marines emerged from these battles as ferocious fighters. According to legend, the Germans who fought at Belleau Wood referred to the Marine adversaries as Teufelfeiden, or devil dogs. Whatever the origins of this legendary phrase, it quickly became part of Marine Corps lore. To many Marines, Sergeant Dan Daly was a legendary hero. As the story goes, during World War I, a young Marine replacement, upon being told that Daly was his first sergeant, exclaimed, "My God, do you mean he's real? I thought he was somebody the Marines made up, like Paul Bunyan." Whoa. World War I ended, on Dan Daly's birthday, November 11th, 1918. After the armistice, Daly served in the Army of Occupation in Germany. His wounds and his age finally caught up with him, and in 1919 he was placed on the list of the Fleet Marine Corps Reserve. Daly lived quietly with his sister in New York City, and after 30 years of service, Daly officially retired from the Marine Corps as a sergeant major on February 6, 1929. While still active with military ceremonies, Daly began working as a bank guard for Brown Brothers Harriman Bank on Wall Street for the next 17 years. Can you imagine a bank robber facing the hero of Bella Wood? Daly served as captain of the Night Guard so he could indulge in his passion for attending Major League Baseball games during the day with his friend John McGraw, manager of the New York Giants. After dealing with health issues for several years, Sergeant Major Dan Daly died on April 28, 1937, of heart disease at his sister's home in Glendale, New York. He was 63 years old. But there was a problem. When his sister, Mrs. Mary Loeb, requested that Dan be buried at Cypress Hills National Cemetery in Brooklyn, as per his request, the cemetery authorities stated that the cemetery was full and no more burials could be made there. Mrs. Loeb then asked if the headquarters of the Marine Corps could do anything about getting permission to bury her brother in Cypress Hills. She also wanted a military funeral by the Marine Corps.
8, 5.
She got her wish.
8, 5.
Sergeant Major Dan Daly's record as a fighting man remains unequaled in the annals of Marine Corps history. He was nicknamed Devil Dog by his colleagues. Major General Smedley Butler called Dan Daly the fightingest man ever to serve with the Marine Corps. If history can be taught with stories, it can never be forgotten. Please like our video, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell to stay informed on the latest videos. And don't forget to leave your comments below and tell us what you like about this video.